Some inane, bizarre person with a disturbed mind wrote that film, and I did not enjoy it.
Ever since the passing of David Lynch this past January, I wanted to make a video as a way to celebrate the career of my favorite filmmaker, but I didn't know what I was gonna do. It's fairly well known that Lynch built up a bit of a reputation for being weird and sort of hard to understand, which has made it difficult for people to approach his movies, and ever since his passing, many of my friends have been asking variations of the same question. I want to get into Lynch, but I'm not sure where to start. Or I've tried getting into Lynch, but it was a bit much for me. Where should I go from here? And I'm sure that that sentiment is shared with a lot of people, but as the biggest Lynch fan I know, I'm here to help you. Yes, you, with a guide on everybody's favorite guy. But before I get into it, I have to preface by saying that a key to enjoying Lynch's work is how you respond to it subjectively. There's not a real way to get it, it's more how you experience it. And not every Lynch project was made equally. So it's okay if one of them isn't clicking for you. But if you don't like the ones that I do, then you have worse taste. Kidding! Now, the goal of this guide isn't to give a definitive path to follow. It's mainly suggestions that I'll be making based on what I'm unfortunately going to be calling your freak level. Yeah, that's really what I went with. If we refer to the chart, here at the bottom is where I put the more tame or mandatory films for anybody starting out, and as we go up to the top of the list, we'll be progressively getting a bit more Lynchian. And for those of you who have already dabbled in more strange and impressionistic films like, I don't know, Titan, then your freak level is probably already in the red, since she fucks a car in that movie. But I'd still recommend watching at least one of the first things I talk about to really get a feel for Lynch as an artist. Now, let's get to what you came here for. Before we get to the work, we should start with the man himself. David Lynch is a filmmaker that was more concerned with expression and craft than making something that could be put into a box. And if it wasn't already hard enough to understand one of his films, trying to make sense of multiple can be a pretty tall order for anybody starting out. It also doesn't help that the man, rightfully, had zero interest in explaining himself or his work. I feel like this can give people the impression that his stuff can be a bit of a chore, and in reality, most people who like his stuff, myself included, still don't really understand a lot of it. But the simple and reassuring answer to how to get into David Lynch is that it's completely up to you. It's fully okay to have a different interpretation of his work than other people. Hell, even Lynch didn't even understand his first film when he was writing it. But because of his approach, you really get to sit with his stories and experience them well after watching. But that doesn't mean it's easy to get into. So we should start with the start. What do you watch first? In my opinion, the best place to start with Lynch would probably be his 1986 film Blue Velvet, which is probably his second most accessible film. It follows a young college student who begins to investigate a mystery when he's visiting his hometown that leads him to discover its twisted underbelly that he never knew was there. I'm keeping it real vague with these descriptions. It'll properly give you a feel for Lynch's knack for visual and emotional storytelling that works in tandem with the script to create a film that is unlike anything you'll ever see. Now, I'll also take this opportunity to say that Lynch didn't usually double dip. What I mean by that is each of his films have their own personalities that set them apart from each other, but this is probably the most textbook Lynch that you can get in the shortest time possible. It will also get you familiar with the themes that he'll explore in his other work, like surrealism, dreams, personal darkness, as well as his often neglected aesthetic. Fellow Lynch heads may be a little confused by what I mean, but I think they'll understand that in my opinion, his visual aesthetic is more generally influenced by classic Americana and noir than it is darkness or evil like most people think. He's not all doom and gloom, and I think that Blue Velvet would help break any negative stigma that you have going into his work. And now you may be wondering, well, why don't I just start with his first movie? Hold your horses, man. Yeah, you can. Eraserhead follows a young man named Henry who finds out he's having a baby, and the baby looks like this.
Beautiful, wow.
Oh, you are sick.
No shit.
I think that Eraserhead would also be an acceptable start on your Lynch journey, but don't expect to fully grasp how you feel on it. On one hand, it is a revolutionary piece of industrial filmmaking that has helped influence future generations of artists across media, not just film, but on the other hand, it's very obviously his first movie. I just think that Lynch experiments with surrealist imagery and themes more effectively in his future work, but if you end up liking this film, then it will continue to blow your mind on future rewatches. I do feel like I get more out of it each and every time. But unlike his others, this one kind of exists in a world of its own. literally, it isn't exactly rooted in the same sort of reality that he usually goes for, which I think holds this back from being the absolute best starting place, but hey, it may be the one for you. Another optimal starting place would be Twin Peaks, which follows Agent Dale Cooper, who enters the small town of Twin Peaks to investigate the strange murder of local sweetheart Laura Palmer, and it is what I would call peak Lynch, and maybe even the best starting place. But there is a little asterisk next to that. Twin Peaks is a series with multiple seasons, so it's immediately a bit more demanding on your time. Also, there was a bit of behind-the-scenes conflict on its original run in Season 2, which caused David to leave, and boy can you feel it. The first season and the first half of Season 2 undoubtedly revolutionized television as a whole forever. We wouldn't have serialized shows without it. It's filled to the brim with some of his best characters, imagery, and all of his best bits.
Gordon, I hope you haven't been waiting too long.
I didn't just get here. I've been waiting the whole afternoon to see you. Can I speak to you a moment in private, Coop?
Of course, Gordon. Harry, can we use your office?
You might ask the sheriff if we could use his office.
Go right ahead.
It expertly navigated this absolutely baffling tone that literally nobody else besides Lynch and co-creator Mark Frost could even conceive. I shit you not, this show can go from goofy and wholesome to genuinely spine-tingling at the drop of a hat. But when Lynch leaves, that all goes out the window. The mystery is revealed, so you don't really care anymore. They didn't know how to use the characters or what to do after the mystery gets revealed, so it turns into a bit of a mess. But the bright side to this is that David did come back to finish out the season, and yeah, he really did that shit.
This motherfucker don't miss.
No, he's fucking good.
That motherfucker don't miss, man.
He's good.
He somehow managed to craft one of the best endings to a season of television that I've ever seen, even after other people messed it up on a fundamental level. But the other caveat to Twin Peaks is that there is a movie and a third season, but they're kind of both their own thing and are both radically different than the original show. So you should probably watch some of this other stuff first, but we'll continue with the future of Twin Peaks in a second. Settle down. If you're willing to make the time commitment or sit through a rough patch, then this show at its best is absolutely worth your time. But if none of these are piquing your interest, then I do have one more starting place for you. Elephant Man follows the true story of Joseph Merrick, a disfigured man who is discovered to be much more than his appearance, and it is strangely one of his nicest movies. You can definitely watch this with the roommates around, for the most part. It shows off how endearing Lynch can be with his writing while adapting what makes his vision work through the lens of a true story, which can make this easier to grasp for a junior Lynchian. This is actually where I started when I got into Lynch, and I found it to be gripping in a way that I would later learn only Lynch could make it, and it was also the only one that I could actually comprehend through my thick 17-year-old skull at the time. But the caveat to this one is that you can't find it anywhere. To my knowledge, in the US, you can't stream, rent, or buy this film physically or digitally, and at that point, just shred the fucking Mona Lisa. What are we even doing, man? If you took the safer path of Elephant Man or Blue Velvet, then I hate to break it to you, but I'm gonna have to toss you out the nest. Sliding swiftly up the freak meter, Mulholland Drive follows a young actress who meets another woman with amnesia after just moving to Hollywood, and the two set out to find the second woman's identity. I think that Lynch is very good at crafting a mystery, and I think this may be the best one in his filmography. I always go back and forth between this and Another as my favorite because this kind of feels like him at the top of his game in all facets. The cinematography is gorgeous, the writing is, dare I say, the best he's ever done, and the Lynchisms are in full effect in this one. If you're struggling with not really fully getting his work, then I think this is a good one to just start going with the flow on. It's impossible to deny that he knew what he was doing when he makes stuff like this, even if you don't get it. But because of how much I love this movie, I don't really want to say anything else about it. You're just gonna have to trust me and see for yourself. If you decided to start with Eraserhead, then I would watch Mulholland Drive. It's basically mandatory viewing if you're in this deep. But if you're more into the dark or psychological aspects of what you've seen, then Lost Highway would definitely be worth checking out. Remember how I said Lynch isn't always doom and gloom? Well, strap in, because that does not apply here. This was definitely a return to form for Lynch, sort of being his modern take on the industrialism that he incorporated into his earliest films. This is also similar to Eraserhead and how human it feels with the restrictions and claustrophobic natures of life and how complicated we are as beings. things like freedom, love, desire may also be just as destructive as the things holding you back because of the guilt or shame that can come with them. It's one of his most intense films thematically, while also being his most stripped back visually. I think it gets down to the deepest and darkest of Lynch from this era that shows how vulnerable he was as a writer. Also, the soundtrack absolutely fucking rips. And if you get a kick out of this one, then I would definitely incorporate some wild at heart into your diet. That film follows a young couple named Sailor and Lula as they hit the road to evade hitmen hired by Lula's mother to end their relationship. Yep. Similar to Eraserhead, I feel like this lacks a sense of control that you might find in his other work, but at the same time it shows just how fluid and fun of a filmmaker Lynch really was. Like the title suggests, this thing is a riot, and it shows how exciting and striking he could be, while also showing how gross and extreme he can get. Basically, if you think that Eraserhead was crazy, then you're right, but this is a him dialed all the way up. It may be a departure from his more psychological or atmospheric stories, but I feel like the sooner you break out of your bubble, the better in the case of these movies. Plus, this may have my favorite cast of his. Laura Dern is one of my favorite of his frequent collaborators, and the inclusion of Nick Cage and Willem Dafoe makes me wish they had a chance to work together again. They are pure fucking gold in this. Even if you don't like it, it would be hard not to at least appreciate the teeth that this thing has, because you're never gonna see shit like this anywhere else. Nobody's doing it like this. And I think it's amazing that this won the Palme d'Or at Cannes. I'm serious. Okay, this is where the video gets a little tricky. As I mentioned before, there's quite a bit more Twin Peaks to go. And if you've made it this far without watching the original series, then I think it behooves you to watch it now, because after you watch the show, we'll move a bit further up the freak level from the show when you get to the movie, Twin Peaks Fire Walk With Me, which was critically panned when it came out, but is now considered one of his best by many, myself included. And I think that this kind of sums up that definitive Lynchian style. It mixes the macabre Americana with this pseudo-noir mystery that follows Laura Palmer. Yeah, Laura Palmer, the dead girl from the show. When I first watched it, I was a little hesitant going in because by this point, we already know who did it, so it made the idea of seeing Laura's last days feel like a little bit of an unnecessary venture. But I was proven wrong when I realized that this is, in a way, not just a simple character study of who I would consider Lynch's strongest character, but a character study on who she is, was, and how she's perceived in her life and after her death. Much like Mulholland Drive, this will scratch every itch you'll have going into a Lynch movie, and I find it hard not to feel satisfied with it by the end as a fan of the show. To summarize this original era, if you really love murder or mystery TV shows, why wouldn't Twin Peaks and Fire Walk With Me have top billing for you? So now you may be asking, what about that third season? The return is, in my opinion, the best thing Lynch ever made, especially episode 8, which is what I personally consider to be the best episode of television I've ever seen. But funny enough, I won't be going into this thing in any real detail, but this is not only a culmination of everything that he built up in Twin Peaks, but his career as a whole, and it's a genuine shame that this is the last large-scale project he ever got to make, because I feel like this should have been enough for him to get funding for literally anything he wanted to do, not just a short on Netflix. No shade to Jack, but come on. This thing is big, it's bold, riveting, and unabashedly Lynch. If you like anything you've seen from his career, there's definitely something to appreciate at some point in the return. And now you may have noticed that I've left out 3 movies, and if I'm being honest, it's because I didn't really know where to place them, sue me. But I definitely see these as movies you can watch whenever you want, after you develop your own understanding of this body of work. So, Dune. Yes, if you don't know, he took a crack at a Dune adaptation all the way back in 1984, and boy is it something. To emphasize how crazy this was to do, Dune Part 1 from 2021 is 155 minutes, and it covers the first half of the book, while Part 2 is 167 minutes and covers all the rest. That is almost 5.5 hours. Meanwhile, David's Dune is shorter than both at a brisk 137 minutes, while attempting the Herculean task of adapting the entire book. So the 1984 movie covers the same amount of story as both modern movies in less than half the time, and it really doesn't work. But it's really hard to deny the charm that Lynch brought to this story with an atmosphere that you will truly never find anywhere else. I see this as both a fun little side quest for fans of David and Dune. Trust me, it's a great time if you just let it happen. Inland Empire is a film that I haven't seen. Fake fan, I know, but I've been waiting for the right time, so what better time than making this video? I've always been a bit intimidated by this thing, so I really don't know what to expect. Okay. What? I can safely say, as someone who is a thorough Lynch enjoyer, that may be the most baffling thing that I've seen in a little bit, and I'm reconsidering watching this while editing as a good idea because I really don't know what to say about it. Well, shit. And finally, the film that the man himself considered to be his most experimental, more than the hauntingly ethereal ending of Fire Walk With Me, the unhinged mania of Wild at Heart, or this fucking baby, is his Disney movie. The Straight Story is the only quote-unquote normal movie in this filmography that follows an old man who travels across the Midwest on a tractor to visit his brother who just had a stroke in the hopes to make amends with him. This is the furthest thing from being Lynchian, but it is still, in a way, a very David Lynch film. It still features his slightly off humor, classic Americana, and it's not even shot too dissimilarly to Twin Peaks. And this film, maybe above all others, clearly defines Lynch as a filmmaker in the strangest way, by putting that term, Lynchian, under just a bit of scrutiny. Each project Lynch ever made has a look and a feel entirely of its own. He was a very fluid and dynamic filmmaker who couldn't be put into a box. I'm not saying that Lynchian is a false way to define his work, but I feel like it's often used to categorize his films, which feels a little ass backwards if you ask me. But when you look at his career as a whole, even the term Lynchian will take on a completely different meaning of its own from person to person. And I came to this conclusion from the one funded by the fucking mouse. I still don't think that this is a good starting place at all, but it is a great way to find a new perspective for this dude that you may have chalked up to only being a freaky guy, but he's not. This, like all of his other work, is another emotion, another part of him, and I really hope that I can play a part for someone finding meaning and appreciation for these films. This was initially a ranking video of all of his work, but I realized after multiple different scripts, placements, and even recordings that I can't do it. I can't rank these movies. I said in this that my favorite thing he's ever done was The Return, but a few months ago, if you ask me, I would have said Wild at Heart. I know that this video's title may be a bit deceiving, but brother, the proof is in the pudding. Watch these films, there's no harm in it. Yes, they can be challenging or off-putting, but I think it's important to be challenged by the media that we consume, because that's part of the magic, baby. And David was a goddamn wizard.
What the f*** is David Lynch doing? He's just sitting on the corner of La Brea in Hollywood with a fucking cow.
It's one of his most intense films thematically, while also being his most stripped back. It's one of his most intense films thematically, while also being his most stripped. Fuck me. It's one of his most intense films thematically, while also being his most why can't I say this fucking word? It's one of his most intense films thematically, while also being his most stripped back visually. I think it gets down to the deepest and darkest of Lynch from what this era. Fuck me.